We'll start us off then. Thanks everybody for joining tonight. My name is Andy Moriarty. I'm the current YPS chair of the ACR Young Physicians section. Tonight's webinar is the RADPAC and the Radiology Advocacy Network, August 2019, Advocacy in Radiology. So just a couple quick things. You'll be muted during the presentation. You have the option to unmute yourself through the controls if you've dialed in through the webinar. If you're on the phone, we will unmute everyone at the end for calls. Use the text messages on the chat box if you can during the call. If you have any questions, we would save them for later. Use headsets if available. It helps with feedback. And just so everyone knows, this webinar is being recorded and will be shared later on. For those who could not attend, it'll be posted on social media websites to follow the meeting. So with that, I think we will get started. On the call tonight with me is Amy Patel and Mike Lee. And I am trying to advance the slide. There it goes. So tonight we're going to answer 3 questions. What does advocacy mean for radiology? Why is it important? And how can you get involved as a member of the RFS or the YPS? So advocacy is one of the pillars of the American College of Radiology. This is the American College of Radiology Association. The mission of the ACR is to serve patients and society by empowering members to advance the practice and science of the profession of radiologic care. You can see that the 7 pillars of the ACR are down there. And then, as we noted, advocacy is one of the fundamental missions of the ACR. We do that by representing the interests of radiologists and their patients in Congress, state legislators, and to regulatory agencies, by educating radiologists and radiologists in training regarding legislative and regulatory developments, and supporting grassroots participation and advocacy via Capitol Hill Days, legislative calls to actions, and the Radiology Advocacy Network, which helps to connect radiologists across the country and keep them informed about all the legislative activity going on related to radiology.
Okay, I'm going to take over and talk a little bit about advocacy and RADPAC. So what is RADPAC? So RADPAC is Radiology's Political Action Committee. Most medical subspecialties have political action committees, including like the dentists. And it is a bipartisan, multi-candidate political action committee of the American College of Radiology Association. So what RADPAC does is support congressmen and women at the federal level in the House and Senate only. Democrats, Republicans, even independents, those who are pro-radiology, who support legislation that supports our patients and our profession. RADPAC actually contributes to all of these campaigns for those, like I said, who represents our best interests in radiology. In 2018, we supported about 70 or so House campaigns and about 10 Senate campaigns, and we had a success rate of over 90%. And we consistently have that success rate, which has been really, really great for the profession of radiology. So I wanted to take this time to discuss a little bit of the nuts and bolts of RADPAC. So if if a radiologist or a trainee contributes, where does your money go? So there's actually a couple types. There is something called hard money, and then there's something called soft money. So hard money is a contribution that is made from a personal bank account. So that would be like if I was contributing to RADPAC. And that hard money actually goes to support these elected officials. Now, soft money is made from a group practice or a corporate account. So if there's a private practice, let's say in Missouri, that wants to contribute, that money is a soft money contribution. And that money goes towards essentially supporting staff. So for example, our government relations and RADPAC staff will often attend the Democratic and Republican national conventions, and it helps sort of get them to where they need to go. Other examples include, like if Ted Burns, our director of RADPAC, is giving a grand rounds on advocacy at some institution, it would cover his costs. So that's where the soft money goes to. So, you might be thinking, why should you get involved? Well, advocacy really does represent our commitment to the future of radiology. And now more than ever, healthcare is becoming increasingly competitive. And, aside from what we want to do for our patients to ensure that they are receiving adequate care and coverage, et cetera, reimbursements for physicians across the whole spectrum of medicine is going down. So we really need to all take a concerted, active effort in political advocacy, not just advocating for our patients, but honestly for the services that we provide, the hard work that we put in to ensure that we're getting fairly reimbursed. And if you sort of practice this political advocacy for radiology day in and day out, it really becomes sort of a state of mind, and it informs your understanding of radiology practice throughout residency and beyond. These are skills that we really, unfortunately, are not taught in residency, but arguably, once you get out of training, it could be some of the most important things that you understand, whether you're in academia, academics, private practice, the VA. You really need to understand radiology political advocacy because it has a huge impact when you are in practice. And then, it's just habit forming. It helps build momentum for future involvement. Like we like to say, you start sipping on the Kool-Aid, and it really just becomes a part of who you are. And then you can take that passion and that interest in advocacy, and you can help infuse that in others so that everyone can be a part of the change. So some recent topics in advocacy that we have advocated on behalf of our profession would be surprise billing continues to be a hot topic for our patients, and price transparency. And as well as, CT colonography, we're continuing to ask for coverage under Medicare for patients to provide an alternative to colonoscopies in certain situations. The PALS Act, we're continuously, me as a breast imager, I am very passionate about any sort of mammography breast imaging legislation. And we are still fighting to ensure that women beginning at the age of 40 are receiving annual coverage through the PALS Act. MPPR, as well as CT lung cancer screening coverage. So these are things that we continue to advocate for our profession. And then the READY Act, which actually, pertains to trainees, where we're really working on, deferring interest for student loan debt for our trainees. And, another one that has continued to be a hot topic is, to prevent cuts in NIH funding. And, that obviously is near and dear to many of our academic radiologists' hearts. So we continue to advocate for all of these issues. Some of these we've already had victories, which has been really great.
All right, so now that we've convinced you of why you should get involved, I want to take over and talk to you about how exactly you can do that. So first off, you should consider joining the RAN, or the Radiology Advocacy Network. So the RAN, which is chaired by Dr. Dave Yeomans, is a grassroots organization whose purpose is to mobilize radiologists, radiation oncologists, and members in training from all across the country to advocate for up-to-the-minute issues affecting radiology and radiation oncology. So the RAN has both resident and fellow and young physician sections, which you can join as a RAN rep. So what RAN reps do is serve as the point person between their training program or institution and the advocacy efforts of the ACR. So what does a RAN rep do? Practically, it means that they're asked to pass on information from the RAN, which includes legislative calls to action, information about upcoming Radvocacy journal clubs, RADPAC events, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Overall, the time commitment is pretty minimal, and we can have multiple representatives from the same institution or training program. So if you're interested at all in being a part of the RAN and getting the people you work with excited about advocacy, you can reach Sarvanas Purjabar if you're an RFS member, or Amy Patel if you're a YPS member. And their information is below, and we'll be sure to get this information out to everyone on the call afterward. All right. So another even easier way to get involved is to get on Radiology Twitter. So I know this sounds funny to some of you, but the Radiology Twitterverse is super happening. And if you haven't joined, you should absolutely join now. So here are some hashtags and accounts you may want to follow if you haven't gotten started. It's a great resource, especially during meetings, if you want to follow along with the action. And below we have a link to our advocacy platform as well. You can follow this link to the RAN Engage platform, which is a centralized resource for more information specific to the RAN. You could also subscribe to the Advocacy and Action e-news, which is put together by our government relations staff. It's a really great way to know about the specifics of just how the ACR is working for us in Washington and how to stay up to date on changes relevant to your practice. Just as an example, the last edition had some information regarding rollouts of new CMS reporting requirements, which as a resident may not be totally relevant to my day-to-day life, but I'm certainly interested and will be more relevant once I'm in practice. The Radvocacy Journal Club is something else you keep up with. It's a relatively new thing that we're getting going. For example, last time we discussed surprise billing and price transparency, which are still major issues that are making their way through the legislature and CMS. So if you'd like to see that one or any prior journal clubs, you can go to the RAN advocacy platform that we linked to on the last slide. And while the things we discussed so far are excellent ways to stay involved on the national level, joining your state society and state RAN might be an excellent way to get started. So depending on your state, you might have a super robust state society that is active in advocating for state-specific issues and even hold its own legislative days. Some might even provide funding for residents to go to ACR. So in the map below, the blue states are incidentally the ones with active state societies. And so, if you live in one of the states that don't have an active state society, you can consider starting one. You can reach out to us on Twitter or through any of the contact information on this presentation. And even if you want to go to ACR and you're from one of these states, we could possibly help you with that. So please reach out.
So another great way in which to get involved is the Rutherford Levanti Fellowship. So the American College of Radiology has these really incredible fellowships, and one of them is this fellowship, which strictly focuses on government relations. It's a one-week program where you essentially learn the legislative and regulatory processes in which the government relations team participates, and you really understand the impact that they have for our patients, our profession, and how they work so tirelessly on our behalf. I was fortunate to be a fellow my senior year residency, and I can honestly say it was one of the best weeks of my training. So I highly encourage, if any of you have a modicum of interest in advocacy, to apply. And if you have any questions in the future, don't hesitate to reach out.
And of course, there's no better way to get even more pumped about advocacy than by attending the ACR annual meeting. So there's amazing RFS and YPS specific programming, including super helpful talks on healthcare economics, advocacy, and practical stuff like how to get your first job. And if you decided to get into advocacy this year, you can celebrate your hard-won years worth of advocating at the RADPAC Gala. Last year was at the National Cathedral. It was absolutely incredible, and it definitely made the year feel worth it. And every year, ACR ends with a bang with Legislative Day, where ACR members meet with their congresspersons about current issues facing radiology. There's also an amazing Twitter contest, of which some incredible examples are below. But honestly, these just scratch the surface. There's literally like dozens or like hundreds of amazing photos from that day. And I feel like it gets better every year. So now I'll hand it off to Andy, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about the RADPAC events.
Yeah, so besides the fellowships and attending in person, what are some of the other ways that we work to get residents and fellows and young physicians involved? There's a couple of RADPAC specific events throughout the year. The next one coming up is going to be Radtoberfest, the month-long competition specifically pitting the RFS against the YPS. And this is a challenge campaign to raise funds for political advocacy. The winners get a celebratory pizza program, and it's based on the number of contributors, not the actual dollar amount. But we do help send those people to the annual meeting, and then any people who are contributing and also attending at RSNA get invited to the RADPAC event, which is held at Monday night, and it's typically around 10 o'clock until midnight. You get to meet Ted Burns and all the great staff there. The next thing that will happen would be in the spring, and that's the Marsh Chapter Challenge. It's a state versus state challenge, which follows the March Madness bracket. It's based on the size of the states, and they're broken out into divisions. Again, it's the number of contributors per state, and up for grabs, bragging rights, raffle tickets, and a check given to the winning state at the annual meeting in ACR. You can see the two of the winners there at the bottom of the screen. And then so some people say, I'm a resident, I have loans, why should I be giving? Well, it's not always easy. It's not always possible to contribute as a resident, but it's a personal decision, what's important to you. And, I said there's no minimum contributions. Residents are encouraged to sign up for what they can. We say $5 is roughly the equivalent of a Starbucks coffee a month. And I think I'll pass it back over to Mike to tell you a little bit more about that. Or no, sorry, Amy.
It's all right. So yeah, so like Andy was saying, I mean, it's tough when whether you're a resident, you're a young radiologist, you have student loan debt. Well, a lot of us do. I mean, I have debt. I know Andy had debt, but it really is, your personal choice and what you want to give back to our profession, because this really is the future of our profession. We're the future leaders of the profession, and it's really important to get involved early. Only 10% of radiologists and trainees contribute to RADPAC, but 100% of us benefit. And so it's really important to take that into consideration and see that there's a very small fraction of radiologist trainees, our ACRGR staff fighting on our behalf, but it really is going to take all of us in the future, particularly as I mentioned, with the increasingly competitive healthcare environment, reimbursement cuts, a lack of coverage for our patients. So it's really, really important. And, it will help direct policy that will impact our patients and our profession for years to come. You will see the change. And it really helps increase this sense of collegiality for radiologists and brings us together to advocate for something that's so imperative for our patients, most importantly.
All right, so to wrap up, advocacy is how we can commit to the future of radiology. And as RFS and YPS members, we have the most to gain for all the effort we put in now. And it's not getting any easier with the upcoming changes in payment reform and an ever-shifting regulatory environment. I mean, it's up to us to stay current and fight on our own behalf and on behalf of our patients. And lastly, we talked about some of the ways that you can make yourself heard. We strongly encourage you to take advantage of everything we discussed in the presentation so that you can join the advocacy community and work with us to make sure that the way we practice radiology in the future is how we've always imagined. All right. So that wraps up the presentation. You guys can feel free to mute yourselves or type your questions in the chat box, and we'll move on to the Q&A section.
So we have about 30 people online here, and it looks like a mix of residents, fellows. Does anybody have questions about the functions of RADPAC, the American College of Radiology Association, how to get involved with advocacy or lobby efforts?
So while people are thinking of their questions, I just want to take a second and say, thank you for all the enthusiasm on Twitter in promoting the webinar, and of everyone who signed up. And thank you all for joining the call. It's really great to see support for advocacy, and I'm sure we'll get a ton more people looking at the recording afterwards. And so, thank you to all of you.
Hello.
Hello.
This is Patel. Thank you guys for hosting this. My question was, so is there, do we get any type of updates on how RADPAC is doing in terms of, telling us quarterly updates or annual updates or anything like that?
There is the Advocacy and Action newsletter that comes out and it keeps people up to date on current activities of the ACRA, as well as any legislative things that would come up in the future. Another thing is signing up for the RAN, as Mike mentioned. That will keep you up to date with the most current topics as the news breaks, basically. Amy, Mike, what else would you recommend?
For those of you who want to subscribe, there is a RAN newsletter that goes out quarterly, and that Radiology Advocacy Network newsletter provides a lot of up-to-date content, which is really fantastic. So if you aren't receiving those quarterly newsletters, just let us know and we'll make sure that you're receiving them. Otherwise, as far and also RADPAC does do a newsletter to contributors about 2 to 3 times a year. So if you are contributing, you are receiving a newsletter at least 2 to 3 times a year to know, essentially, where your money is going and how we're doing. And there's also periodic updates on the RADPAC website as well.
Thank you.
I don't know if Ted, if you're on the call, if you had anything to add. I think the question was specific to RADPAC. Well, I know that if you go to the RADPAC website, they do publish an annual report if you want to see exactly which congresspeople we supported and how their campaigns did, as well as a list of the individual contributors. That's all available on the website.
Yeah, so particularly for RADPAC, yes. So Twitter, obviously, they have an active RADPAC account. RADPAC Twitter account. Like I said, if you're a contributor, you will receive newsletter updates about 2 to 3 times a year, and then they try to keep the website current as well. So those are sort of the avenues to keep you in the know on the RADPAC side.
Great.
Awesome.
And I'm just looking at the chat. We see lots of comments, people saying thanks. I think we have Dave joined us, but he is muted. And is there anybody who's had we'll have to unmute Dave. We'll give him a chance to say hi to everybody.
Yes.
Hey, folks. Yeah, it's Dave Yeomans. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Yeah, sorry about that. Thanks for a really great presentation. It's great to see the number of people who are participating. Just for a little bit of context, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Dave Yeomans. I am chair of the RAN. I've been very lucky to have the crew that you see in front of you helping me out and really leading on some issues and leading on getting the word out to folks. Thank you all for participating. I hope tonight that you come away with a sense of 2 things, really. The sense number 1 is that grassroots advocacy for those of us who are on this call and all of our colleagues is super important. We have an impact, we have the opportunity to make a difference, and if we're quiet, then our legislators assume that we really don't care enough to sort of speak up, organize, and do something. Secondly, although it feels intimidating, it's actually pretty simple, and once you start getting the hang of it, it's actually pretty fun. I mean, if we remember that we've elected these people and they get paid by our tax dollars, you can think of it sort of like they work for us. And if they work for us, then I think it's not only fair, but sort of incumbent on us to let them know what our expectations are. So thank you all for joining us today, and I hope you will continue to be active, maybe even more active, in advocating for what your interests are, and also for the interests of our profession, both at the federal level and at the state level, where there's a lot of room for good work and a lot of room for influence on important issues to educate people about where we stand on things and what the consequences of their decisions and their legislations are. So thank you all for attending, and thanks to Andy and to Michael and to the ACR staff for making this possible tonight.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks to our staff. They make everything happen. And when Dave talks about being involved, I think hopefully that some of the things you take away from this webinar is it's very easy to get involved. We really want people to be involved at the local level. So we are happy to share tips and pointers. We will share these slides or a couple other presentations that have been pre-prepared if you're interested in giving them to your program, your practice, at your state chapter meetings. If you would like some coaching on how to approach that topic, feel free to reach out to us. And then just send one of us an email or a link if you want to know how to sign up to be involved at the state level. You know, we'd love to have more RAN reps who are Radiology Advocacy Network reps who are members in training and early career people who want to stay involved and stay informed and help spread the message to their colleagues at the state level. And we just saw a question about Montana. Yes, if you're from Montana and you join the RAN, we will start working on that right away.
Yeah, we can make it blue on the RAN map. Beyond that, it's no guarantees.
Well,
Andy and Mike, this is Tom Hoffman. I just wanted to reiterate Dave Yeoman's thanks, and also quickly mention that the reason RADPAC is with ACRA, that extra initial, as Amy mentioned, is the way we're legally organized. The tax gurus here in Washington, D.C. require that any educational charitable organization like the college cannot do anything political. The most ACR could do would be get a nonpartisan get out the vote drive together, which isn't too exciting or effective. So that's why about 20 years ago, the college founded RADPAC through the legally separate American College of Radiology Association, the ACRA. That's the membership organization that works with advocacy. And anyway, when you wonder why there's that extra initial next to ACR for anything political, that's why. So please keep that in mind when talking with colleagues. And I'm really fortunate to work with a great crew, Ted, Melody, and Ed Smith. Thanks.
Yeah, well, great staff all around. And like I said, just try to stay involved. If you want to know more, reach out to any of us, and we're happy to provide you with any of the support you need. And this webinar, of course, the recording will be available. There's other materials available online and through the Radiology Advocacy Network website, as well as through the email chain. So check for us on the website, on the Engage platform, on Twitter, and just let us know if you need anything else. But we're going to try to keep this webinar to a half an hour unless there are any other questions. If you want to unmute themselves or in the text box, we'll do one more minute, and I think we'll say good night. All right, well, we will wrap up the meeting, and we'll get this recording processed and posted online just as soon as we can. Thanks, y'all.
All right.
Thank
Thank you to our
you.
presenter.
Thank you.